No joke, guys. Because I love this and I love you guys, I just got really overwhelmed. You know when you have a really overwhelming time? I cannot speak more highly of how, for the first time in months, I feel like myself, but this is how much I love all of you. We took notes on the back of a dirty pizza box. That's what we did. But episode 4, and thank you to the person who gave me a trigger warning before episode 5, but I feel like trigger warning before everything we talk about with Interview with the Vampire now. But this is the sleeper hit, right? This is like the best show on TV right now, and nobody wants to say it. I think people don't want to say it because it's like, no, believe me, I get it. I love my Tolkien. I love, I'm digging Rings of Power. I love Westeros. I love House of the Dragon. But I feel like because these giant things, but it's like, not only are the Anne Rice stans like, we love this. There's a huge fandom for this too. But I just feel like they're not as vocal. But outside of that, film nerds, I don't know why people aren't hyping this up more. This is fantastic. But yeah, trigger warning from forever. All of my reviews, just trigger warning for domestic abuse and violence. I am shocked at how well they have handled the Claudia stuff. Because that can get real, no matter what. In the book, in the original movie, in the series, having an eternal little girl and dealing with sexual stuff can get real weird real quick. Every single time, I'm like, something bad's gonna happen, and then they're not gonna handle something right, correct, right? And then all of a sudden, no, they handle it so great. Okay, guys, everybody with Motor City Nerds here. We got our pizza box. We're ready to go. I really loved this. I really loved this Claudia-centric episode, and I didn't expect them to go this route, and like I've been saying, having a little girl who's really an adult can get really creepy really quick. This did not, and I think that they not only handled it really well, but just handled, like, becoming a woman extremely well. Of Louis going, okay, Daniel, I'm going to allow you to look at these diaries. And I did like later in the episode when Daniel's like, where were they in the 70s? And he's like, if you had all of these and it had every single time that you had failed your daughters, because that's what he says. He says, I have 2. He goes, now if you could read in detail. And I did like when Louis like, she's a vivid writer, isn't she? Like, if you could see every time you directly failed them, would you want to read that? And I was like, oh, Louis, poor Louis. But even her opening monologue of going, I thought I was in heaven. It was so cool and clean, like the picture houses and this and that. And she's comparing it to these real world things. And then she goes, I thought I was in heaven. And I thought these were angels. She kept calling him the black angel about Louis. And then she says, and then the white angel came in. And I realized very quickly I was not in heaven. I was in hell. And these were demons. And I really liked it. And I liked Lestat tries avoiding it, and this is what I'm talking about when an abuser tries to make you an island. Lestat don't want to share Louis. He doesn't see, somebody left a comment, and I was trying to explain it, but text can come off, so, like, anyway, everybody takes text differently, but, yeah, somebody said, like, well, why this? And I was like, because an abuser does not see you as a person. They see you as property. That's why, even to this day, there are complications of me and my ex being around each other, because he doesn't see me as a human. He doesn't see it as, I am sorry to Abby. He sees it as, you're my property, and that's why confrontations happen, and that's why fights, because people will be like, if you guys have been broken up, why is he still acting like this? And I was like, because he doesn't see me as a human. He sees me as property, and that's exactly how Lestat sees this. If sometimes it's fun and a good time being a little family, but then it's like, no, you're getting in Louis' coffin. No, you're taking up more of Louis' time, more of Louis' mind, and it bothers Lestat. Because Lestat tries to avoid changing her. And he's like trying to make up excuses. And Louis' like, no. And that's what I was saying with the other one was, this is Louis' idea of redemption. This is his way of saving somebody from the problems that he caused. He was completely honest with her about that. And do you want to know what? I liked seeing that Whitey McWhite disemboweled with a whites only sign around him. I thought that was very striking, and I liked it. I think that Lestat, not only from like the abusive standpoint, is pissy with Claudia, but there are times when he genuinely does really like her because they're more alike when it comes to the killing and stuff. But you can even see what I mean by the abuser thing is when Louis and Claudia can have conversations in their own head, but Lestat can't hear them because he's their maker. And I like when she says, what? So he's the dumb one? And that's when Lestat knows something's up, and he gets all quick and is right next to her, and she goes, oh, you can do whatever? And he's like, yeah, and I'll train you too. But all that was a power move. That was an intimidation tactic. That was going, look what I can do that you can't do. Remember, I'm stronger than you. Remember, I'm faster than you. Remember who's in power here, and it ain't you. This was one of my favorite moments of the entire episode, and it was because of, it just reminded me of something my mom would say, but they do such a good job of having this family be a family, and having Lestat and Louis raising their daughter. Like, there were things that we could all relate to, but I loved when she goes out for the first kill in the park, and then they're like, don't kill cops, and she's like, don't kill cops. Like, it's just like everything that they're scolding her for or trying to tell her to do, they are yelling at her like, don't write on the walls, don't draw on the walls with crayon. But the truth is, it's these huge things of like, don't eat people. You know what I'm saying? And there was just a comic thing to that I really liked. But one of the things that I almost spit my drink out was when, and like I said, it's the little things like this that make you go, oh, I believe that this is a couple and stuff, is when she first hops out in the park and he says, and Lestat goes, I don't know how I feel about that pleated skirt. And then Louis like turns and goes, it's chiffon. It moves. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so funny. And it's just the little details like that that are not only funny and add to the characters, but we get this sense of, it's like I talk about with Breaking Bad. Not only is it just great, but the feel of Breaking Bad, even though it is a real world story, but still, you know what I'm saying? But it feels like at any moment we could go to Albuquerque and run into any of these people. You know what I'm saying? It feels like we could go to a gas station and run into Jesse Pinkman, or turn on the TV and see a Saul Goodman ad. Like, it feels like these people are real. And when you care about characters, that's when people get invested, and they do a great job with that. And it's the little things like that with Louis and Lestat that really sell this relationship and hold this amazing show together. I love it. Without that emotion and without those little beats, I don't think this would be as good. We have Louis telling her right before she does her first kill, like, you could go after the beast, and he tells Lestat, oh, look who she's taking after. And then when she not only takes one person down, but takes down two, and like I said, the whole time they're yelling at her as if she's a kid who drew on the walls with crayon, not eating people. It's hilarious. But then Lestat looks at Louis and says, who does she take after? And I do think that Lestat does genuinely have a fondness for Claudia. It's just Louis is his number onesies and his. At first, they have her staying in Louis' coffin, and we can tell that's getting to Lestat, and she's always writing in the journals, and Lestat's like, can you cut the shit? I think Lestat makes the choice very early on that Claudia won't make it forever for immortality, and this is when she says, Uncle Les, if you made me and Daddy Louis, who made you? And then he says, I'm not very happy when haven't been getting good sleep lately, and he essentially shuts that down real quick. And but prior to that, I loved seeing the family dynamic of good night, good night, good night, and we're all closing our coffins. The scene there's something magical about fireflies, you know? I thought everybody had those, but I guess not everywhere does. And there's a place by my cabin where if you go through, it's just completely dark. And at a certain time of year, you can just, once you get through this pathway, you just see thousands of them. And it's just magical. So anytime I see fireflies in a jar or anything, it's just magical to me. And I love it. And there's something about the bayou and all of them being, and Louis and Claudia being on the boat. Like, there's just something mystical and magical. And I've said this about New Orleans before. There's something fairy tale-like about it, just inherently. This is where we get Louis finally questioning a little bit, because you don't, when it's not easy to admit. And when you're in those situations, I tell people it's like the eye of the storm, and you know when it's really calm, you don't realize that. That's why, like, when Louis gets so upset with Daniel Malloy in the last episode, it's like, okay, no, you don't see it. You don't see it that way. And then we get into it more in episode 5, but that's going to be in a different video. When Claudia tells Louis, Uncle Les has secrets, and Louis' like, huh? And I think that's the first time Louis has even questioned anything around, not so much the abusive part and the manipulation part and their relationship stuff, but more of like, you're kind of right. And he hasn't had that yet. And that's why abusers make you an island. At first everyone's cool. Everyone's fine. Your friends are cool. Your family's cool. And then slowly over time, they're like, oh, yeah. And they start to put doubt in your head about all of those people. And you start slowly pushing them away, and you think that's a good thing. And then it's just like, oh, well, whatever, and you think you're alone. And like I've said before, you're not alone. If you need to reach out to somebody, I guarantee you, reach out to somebody. They're waiting for that call. You are not alone. And you don't know that you're in abuse until you do, whether you realize it on your own or realize it through somebody else. Like I said, the eye of the storm. All of a sudden, you're like, holy shit, how long has this been going on? How long have I been in it? How long? What's going on? And then it's just so much to take in at once that you're just like, okay, well, what? And then it's just, you're so comfortable with each other and stuff that it's like you can't, or depending on the situation, I can't just walk away or whatever it is. And it's like, oh my God. And it's a lot to take in, but I don't think that Louis fully realized the abuse stuff yet, of course, but I definitely think this is the first time he's like, I called him Les, that Uncle Les or Lestat keeps certain information from Claudia and Louis. And he's like, oh yeah, I don't really like that. And I liked Claudia being like, no, information is power, and he has that over us. And just because you're not getting punched in the face yet doesn't mean that someone holding that over you as a form of power isn't abusive or manipulative. I did love Louis snatching that fish. Let's get to like funner stuff, like Louis snatching that fish up out the water. That was really cool. When you make things weird is when you talk about them for 30 minutes and try to over-explain them, and then it's like, oh yeah, you're kind of gross and weird. But I loved when she said, how does it work? And he says, what? And she goes, love between two men. And he just says, it's love. It's just love. And I was like, oh, thank you. And that's it. It's love. People don't choose who they want to fall in love with. In present day, and I liked this, because this just adds to like more themes we could get into if you guys want to, but the undead keeper, who's praying, and he's Muslim. And Daniel Malloy's like, would Muhammad really be about that? Because weren't you just saying that you worship Louis as your god? Like trying to be a smartass. Now, I don't know where you guys are from, but I live by, and I'm friends with, Dearborn, Michigan, which is the highest Muslim/Arabic population, because not every Arabic is Muslim. There are Chaldeans, which is, I'm not going to get into it all right now, but either way, learn. It's the highest Arabic population outside of the Middle East. So that's just very common to me, is seeing people pray. They do at work, whatever. Like, that's just a very common thing to me. But I liked seeing it depicted this way, and I really loved him saying, and like I said, this is a huge theme here of time passing and who's really like a native. Undead Keeper says something in a different language, but it isn't Arabic. And I even could pick up on that because, like I said, I'm around it. So I was just like, that ain't Arabic. And then when Daniel Malloy was like, oh, I thought you were a native. How come you're not speaking Arabic? And he says, Dubai it was made here. It's a child of all this different stuff. Nobody's a native here. So I liked this idea of not just like people being turned into vampires or changed or whatever it is, but like the idea of cities rising and falling and countries rising and falling. And if you really deep dive into that, it's really interesting the way it could connect to different themes in this story, and I liked it. And this was super heartbreaking. And like I said, we barely even get any Louis. Like in present day, we barely get any Louis. We just have Daniel going through these diaries, and they tell him to go. They're like, we suggest you go from here to here, and we see Daniel in his journalist way. Just at first, he's just kind of going through them, and then he starts going through them in order. But when we see the diary where she writes about Charlie, and we see the flowers tucked into certain spots, I was like, oh. That's exactly what it's like when you're a teenage girl and you meet your first love or your first crush, and it's so important to you, somebody that you care about when you're a little girl. I'm like, oh, that hit hard. I guess not even like a little girl. It's just like your first crush gave you something and you kept, you know what I mean? And it was just nice. Really loved them showing the house and how it was different. And it was like the Bat Cave, and we have beds swapping out and all that. Everything about the vampire house was really cool. And them going to get Claudia her own coffin was hilarious. I thought that was genuinely funny. And even when I like the way they're showing, because like I said, perfect storytelling with a camera, but they don't need to tell the audience something's up. Like that guy just says, something's not right here. And all of a sudden Louis like, damn it. So we know they're already reading his mind, and we know Lestat's about to hurt or take him out. And Louis goes up, it closes the window, shades. But instead of treating the audience like they're stupid idiots, you just do that, and you're not going, we are reading his head, he knows that we are undead, we need to kill him. And I respect that, because that means you think your audience is intelligent, and we are. And they've been doing that throughout the series, but I just wanted to hype it up there because that was a really good way of showing, like, you don't really need to know that they're reading their mind. You just know somebody's kind of onto us. But they've been doing, like, you need to know that that's a constant thing going on all the time. Even when Claudia we see Claudia get her coffin, and then she notices, like, oh, well, now Uncle Les is getting in with Louis, where I was before. Do you guys think that Lestat was not having any resentment towards Claudia for taking up space in that coffin for a while? And then when she says she got her own room, this is what I mean about showing the family stuff so well, is when she screams at Lestat, like, you have to knock first. And it just, I think we can all relate to that. But then she's getting older. Oh my God. And then she's getting older. We have her birthday party. We have Lestat give her this fancy jewelry that he got from wherever. And I'm sure that's something, but and then she says, well, when will I grow into it? And they're like, we'll find you one that fits. Instead of saying, you're never going to grow into it. But these are the little things that make it funny and great and add to these characters. And like I said, make it relatable, is when she says, how old are you, Uncle Les? And Louis says 160, and he goes 159. Then we get the phone call that Louis' mom passed away, and they need to go to the funeral. And now we can see that this sister has become resentful of Louis not being around. Man, I remembered his name. Levy? Something, the brother-in-law. And I give him mad credit because he's been trying to stand by his wife and be like, hey man, cut this out. And like, you know what I mean? But you can tell that they were like, yeah, we've heard the story before, for the christenings, for everything. And I really felt that, because I'm joking around when I say it, but it's true. When you work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., people don't understand it, first and foremost, and then it's like you miss a lot of regular, everyday stuff, and it sucks, and it hurts. So I felt that, but then they end up getting into the money argument, and you can tell, I loved when Louis said, did you forget what I did to that door? I liked that it was almost as if Louis was like, yeah, no, I don't even care. Like, it's not that he didn't care, but he didn't care because he knew how his mom felt about him. And I really liked, once again, like I said, not treating your audience like they're stupid little idiots. Claudia is saying she hasn't been around humans very much. She's a vampire, the bulk of her life. So she's like, the smells are different, everything. But I really liked when she's like, I've never seen a dead person so peaceful. Like, she just doesn't know how to behave at these things. And when Louis goes up to talk to his sister and her brother, and his brother-in-law, it starts to get a little aggressive. And then she's like, who is this little girl? And he's like, I'm raising her. And then she's like, should you gays really have a kid? You definitely tell that they're being judgmental of that. That's what I mean about reading their minds all the time. So remember that. So it's like, when Louis comes up to Claudia and says, you should go talk to your Uncle Les because he kind of needs it right now, it's because nobody at this event is talking to him or acknowledging him. And guess what? From my crazy Irish Catholic, we make the rules or we shun you side, I've had relatives where that's happened, where it's like, we're going to pretend that you're not gay or you're not whatever, and we're just never going to acknowledge your significant other that you brought over here. And it's so mean and it's so cruel. So I liked Louis saying, like, you should go talk to him. He could really use it right now. And Claudia walks away. That's when they start getting into their tense conversation. But you will see when the brother-in-law steps up behind the sister a little more aggressively, that's when Lestat and Claudia appear behind Louis. Like, no, remember, we're a family and we have his back too. And this is what makes me super sad. And I know grief can make people do. Always remember, when you lose somebody, grief makes people do weird stuff. And sometimes the money is like the way to detach from the scenario going down. Does that make sense? So I've seen that happen, and then it causes friction in a family because they're like, why are you bringing up money so quick? And it's like, sometimes that's somebody's coping mechanism, and sometimes people are just being scumbags about it. And this felt just a little scummy to me, where she was kind of like jealous and resentful of Louis, like, you and your white boyfriend are fine with your little daughter over on whatever street, so at least give us this, make sure we're good. And the brother-in-law's like, we can pay you in installments. And he's like, whatever, we'll have the paperwork drawn up. But it's like, Louis is monetarily providing for them still, even though they're treating him like shit. And it seems like the sister has changed her tune a little bit, and that was sad to see. But like I said, grief can also add a lot to that, especially when there's already resentment building up from other things. And then maybe, I don't know, you not making time, how I see it, not making time for your own blood but then you're making a whole ass family over here. I'd be pissed off too. Oh my God. This is what I mean about Claudia not understanding, and she just says the smell is kind of weird, and she's talking about the dead body rotting there, and I loved Lestat's last little dig of saying, yes, that's because wakes were created in a place where it doesn't get hot ever, and it snows. Like, just one more little, like, dig at them for coming at Louis, I felt like, and that's what I mean. Like, you have to remember they're reading Louis's family's heads, their brains, the whole time. So I'm sure that he wants to say a lot more than he did. With Claudia's inner monologue, and this actress was great, of saying, like, when they fought in French, it was funny. And, even their French fight, I loved that. And he's like, what teenager does this? And he's like, you can't remember what it was like to be young. And you could tell that kind of bothers Lestat. Obviously, his age thing is bothersome to him and is a trigger. And she was like, that was funny. When they fought in English, it wasn't so funny. And so she's starting to notice these things between the two of them aren't so healthy. And what she was saying was, like, when I was young and a little girl, I knew I could get in between them, and we would all be one big happy family after a fight, but now it's getting toxic and worse and worse. Now I love this. I absolutely love this, is when Daniel Malloy says to Louis, and what, you thought she was a Band-Aid for your relationship? Because a lot of people feel that way, and don't ever think that a baby is going to fix a relationship. It will not. It won't. It won't. Lestat teaching Claudia to drive. That was so good. It was so good. And it was just funny. Like I said, it was just one of those real, relatable things that I really liked, was Lestat and Claudia together. And we don't get to see them alone together a lot. And even she says that. She says, me and Daddy Louis were super tight, but me and Uncle Les also had our moments together. And I loved that. And Lestat obviously is doing this on purpose. He's obviously doing this on purpose. Eventually he wants her to go away. And, so he takes her to Lover's Lane. Like, that doesn't, because we already have the conversation of teenagers questioning their existence, yada, yada, yada. Well, now you're showing her that. And I really liked her running up on a car, and before doing anything, she's like, okay. Because you would be getting those feelings. And like I said, this could get real weird and real creepy real quick. And I felt like they handled it really well. And then she goes home and gets dressed up like she's older and wants to go out. Well, she gets dressed up like she would if she was aging. Like, that's the normal thing she would wear. But then she goes out and she hears people making fun of her and hears them saying, is this little girl just playing dressed up? She hears creeps, she hears this, she hears that. And then we meet Charlie, the cutest, nicest guy who she has a huge crush on. I really, 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 really loved Charlie. And this was super sad, was him saying, you don't seem that old, like this, that, and the other. And then they're eating ice cream, which was super cute. And she says, without saying how old she is, because she doesn't want to say that, she says, I'm old enough to remember around the street there was a toy shop and this and that. And he's like, if you can remember that, you must be at least whatever age. And they're trying to show that Charlie isn't a creep. And he's questioning it, though, a bit. But unlike Louis, Claudia couldn't help herself when they hooked up, or went to. And then when Lestat burns the body and says, no, you're going to watch, I was like, and he tells her that's why we don't get attached to mortals. I was like, oh my God. But prior to that, and here's where, like I said, I really didn't pick up on this until the end of the episode, where Claudia's kind of suicidal the entire time. And, not the entire time, but in the beginning of the episode, we have her running around like a little kid. And then remember, she's getting older and older and older. But so in the beginning, she's younger and she's running around and she's pulling I love the light they have for the sunlight coming in. And she's like sticking her arm underneath it, a bit self-harmy. But especially after Charlie's death, she's really she almost walks straight into it. Like that's what they're showing. Like, I might take myself out. But instead, she's just self-harming worse and worse and worse. And that's another thing that, if you need help with that, reach out to somebody. You're not alone. I didn't think it was going to go there. And let me just establish this, because I want to just give this its own due, is when after Charlie's death and she's covered in the blood, right before she's stepping up and right before she sticks her arm real underneath that. Like, I think in the beginning it was more of like, ha ha, and now it's like, no, I want to feel the pain of this. And she's like, how could, and she talks about her human past too, and that wasn't so great, and that her uncle was a creep to her, and she goes, how could a little girl, and I loved them showing this, well, not a little girl anymore, a girl becoming a woman and showing her sad, happy, laughing, crying, content, not. I loved showing that rapidly in the coffin, And then she hops out, and that's when we hear her saying even more, like, how could this girl whose uncle was a creep to her, whose auntie turned her back, who whatever this and that, who got brought in by these vampires, who's now undead, still have a sense of humor? And then she says this and that of, with a flat chest that will never grow and a hairless crotch that nothing will ever come of, like, how could I keep going? And I'll tell you how. And I really was taken back by how poignant that was, and things I wasn't expecting. Like I said, I was not expecting the self-harm stuff. I was not expecting a lot of what went on in that episode. And then by the next episode 5, that's crazy. And I'm really sorry, you guys, because I feel like I just got really overwhelmed last week, and I needed to just take a beat for a minute. But yeah, I'm so happy to be talking about this again. And then, like I said, I love Louise. I do love in present day when we have Louise' tree. And that's very symbolic of like this living thing. He has this outdoor-esque area with fake sunlight for this special tree so that maybe he can have some kind of outside life that isn't dark and dim in the darkness. And I really like that. But you can definitely tell that I love the way Jacob Anderson is playing Louis. I cannot speak more highly. But when Daniel Malloy is like, oh no, I like her, yada yada yada, and says it's, what does he say? Anne Frank meets Stephen King. I thought that was a great line. When Daniel Malloy is sitting there, he's visibly bothered by what he just read. And then we finally, I think it's for the first time in the whole episode, we have Louis entering the room and sitting in that tree room. And he's like, a vivid writer, isn't she? And he's like, yeah. And that's when they have the conversation about the daughters. And he's like, I had a daughter. And like I said, when you're with an abuser, it doesn't matter if it's your kid. It doesn't matter who it is to you in their eyes. You are their property. But I did. I really loved this episode. I really loved them, bing, bang, boom, getting all of the Claudia stuff. I loved it kind of being centered around her. I loved seeing what was going on with the family. Daniel Malloy telling them that this isn't just an article, this is going to be a book. Even his back and forth with the Undead Keeper, really loved it. I loved everything about this episode. And a lot of it hit home, especially, I mean, any teenager can relate to growing up, you know what I mean? There was just a lot here that I was like, wow, I didn't think you were going to go there. But it does help with because a lot of people are saying that. They're like, how do you handle this in a not creepy way? And I thought they did a great job. And I really loved it. And not just handling it in a great way, but just like I said, the beauty of how Claudia expressed herself becoming a young woman and being stuck this way was beautifully done. And then, like I said, adding in the self-harm and just everything about it. I think that episode 4 has been my favorite so far. 5 is brutal, so get ready for that. But yeah, I'm Abby with Motor City Nerds. Sorry that this one's so short, but man, I think they said there's 2 more episodes left, but I'm fully enthralled with this show. Yeah, I'm on Instagram, I'm on OF, I'm on all the stuff. It's down below I'll put it in the comments because I always put it in the description, but then somebody said that the other day, they were like, where are your links at? And I was like, they're in the description, but I don't mind like reposting them. It's not a big deal. But either way, yeah, I gotta get ready for work. And go watch Interview with the Vampire. It's so damn good.